Okay, so we're going to be starting this out using the vine charcoal. That's the charcoal that looks like a twig in your box. And we are starting with the sphere first, and you're tracing the tape just to get the outline of the sphere using the vine charcoal. And you can see that I went for the inner circle of the tape. Okay, so I'm doing a method that's called sighting. I'm going to take my charcoal tool and I'm going to line up the end of the charcoal tool with the sphere that's on the paper there. And I'm putting my index and my thumb and I'm making a mark there so I know the length. So now I'm going to take that length of the sphere and I'm going to compare it to the height of the cone. So that's one sphere right there that I can fit inside the cone. I want to see if I can fit two spheres. So if I stack a second sphere on top, I can get 2/3 of a sphere for the top part of the cone. So it's one sphere stacked on 2/3 for the cone. That's how I can get a precise measurement of the cone itself. So I'm just taking that over. There's the 2/3. And I'm slowing this down so that you can see it. Once you get adept at using measuring sighting, it becomes much faster and you can whip it out pretty fast. Now I'm looking at where does the base of the cone hit the sphere, because it's all about positioning it in the right place. And to me it looks like it's almost at the midpoint, maybe just a hair below the midway line on the sphere. And I'm putting a mark there for the base of the cone, and then I'm going up to the top. So those two marks there indicate how many spheres I can fit within the cone. So it's, again, one sphere plus 2/3 of a sphere. And now I'm drawing in a plumb line, dividing the cone in half vertically. So I'm going to draw that plumb line onto my paper too. So I'm using that plumb line to divide the cone in half. And I'm looking at where that sits on the reference picture. So it looks like it goes just through the right-hand side of the sphere, just barely. So I'm going to do the same thing to my paper. So I'm just going to put my ruler down there, draw a vertical line. If you're having trouble with a vertical line, look at the edge of your paper. It's a perfect vertical. I see all the time where students have crooked verticals. You just want to make sure yours is lined up with the edge of your paper, and go ahead and draw that line in. To start a perfect cone, you have to get a triangle base. So I'm going to the midway point on that vertical line, and I'm going to draw a base. It's going to look like an upside down T, and I'm measuring it 3 inches across, but I'm making sure that there's 1.5 inches on the left side, 1.5 inches to the right. And then I'll be connecting the lines from the base of the T to the top pole there, that vertical axis, and do the same thing to the other side. That's how you get an accurate triangle. And then because it is a cone, I'm going to be curving the bottom. You can see I actually halted my line there so I didn't actually draw through the sphere. That way I'm saving myself some erasing time. Okay, so I'm just wiping out with a tissue the lines that I don't need, mainly that center axis line. You want the cone to make sure it looks actually like a party hat. And I'm checking and measuring the height or the width of the cone at the tip to get the distance in between the sphere and the cube. You can also just eyeball it. It's about 1 inch, you guys. And I'm looking, where does that cube hit? If I draw a horizontal line straight across horizontally, where does it hit on the sphere? And it hits just about upper halfway. It's just above the halfway mark on the sphere. And I'm going to do the vertical axis of the cube first, or just that first angle there. And then you're going to create what looks kind of like an open book. I am sighting my angles here. So slight angle, what happens to one angle happens to the angle above it. Make sure your vertical lines are parallel. On another note, you should make sure that your cube is wider than your sphere. If you measure your sphere and check it against the cube in the picture, the cube is wider. And it's wider on the left-hand side than the right if you want to be specific. I'm just drawing that into place there. The top of your cube needs to look like a diamond, but it should be a distorted diamond, like a diamond that's been flattened. And I am using the ruler as a straight edge to try and get a perfect tool. You can see I'm taking that angle. Those are parallel angles, making sure those opposite angles are exactly the same ones. The same angles are parallel. And here's the pyramid. So I'm doing the V pattern that's at the bottom of the pyramid. It's the base of the pyramid. And I'm actually just sighting my angle, holding my vine circle at that angle and transferring that to my paper. Here we go. And then I'm straightening my lines with the ruler just to perfect it. Okay, so lastly, I'm going to get in that cylinder. So there is kind of a tangent going on. A tangent is when you have an awkward angle. So I'm moving that vertical line a little bit farther to the right than it is in the photograph so that I can avoid that visual awkwardness that's happening where that vertical side of the cylinder is meeting up with the corner of the cube. So when you're starting a cylinder, you have to start off with a rectangle first. That is the form version of the cylinder. So the top, I'm going to straighten out a little bit, but then I'm going to turn the top part into an ellipse. So an ellipse is a distorted oval. It's an oval that's been stretched, both on the left side and the right side. So to do that, I'm putting a little mark to show where the middle of the cylinder would be, because that's where it would be the widest flared. And I'm going to try and get an oval there. You want to make sure that the edges are rounded, not pinched. They don't need to be sharp, they need to be curved. Okay, so you can see I'm drawing in a horizon line. In this case, the horizon line is where the tabletop meets the background. And then I'll be looking for the cast shadows. So I'll be examining where those are. So I'm looking at the angle of the shadow. You got to remember that on the sphere, the shadow is going to be an oval shape. And I'm drawing them in lightly. The great thing about the vine charcoal is you're not committing 100% to it. You can erase things out. The thing about this kind of drawing is this drawing has to be solid. It has to be really accurate before you can move on. There's no point in spending a lot of time on shading if your overall bones of your drawing aren't perfect.